main thing is you have to win.
You guys know I'm going to Las Vegas, so I'm fired up about it. Hell yeah, I'm going. Of course I'm going. Yeah.
All right, welcome back to the Just Win podcast presented by PrizePicks. I'm your host, Ted Nguyen, and I'm joined today by Nico, or otherwise known as Elite Takes on TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, or X, or wherever you find, or wherever you like social media. He's big on it. So, Nico, thank you for joining us. He came just from the game. He got to witness the AOC Legacy Drive live. How was the atmosphere?
The atmosphere was actually a lot louder than I expected late in the game. Usually with preseason, a lot of people dip out at halftime. And, I thought, especially because Houston was up a lot at halftime, I was surprised to see the atmosphere late, but it was a lot of fun. I mean, there was legitimate, noise for AOC to get those play calls in. And that was some nails throws from him down the stretch. I mean, that deep post was awesome.
Yeah. Well, somebody in the chat said this is a crazy, unexpected collab, but I've been following Nico for a while. I think we've been following each other for a while, and we chat online and react to each other's tweets and things like that. But you were actually at the Raiders and Houston's joint practices, right? Are you from Houston?
Yes, yeah. So I'm based in Houston. So, I'm a Dolphins fan, but I try to make it out to as many Texans practices as possible because I just think it's really fun to see the way they compete, and it's just an opportunity that I always try to take advantage of. So I was really excited to make it out to the joint practice as well because there's a lot of intriguing talent on the Raiders as well. So I thought it was a really exciting joint practice. The moment I saw the preseason schedule drop, I knew I had to be there.
Yeah, it's cool to. Well, it's good that you were at the joint practices because you get a sense of what was going on with these teams. And then you go into the game, and then it's a kind of continuation of what went on. And the big theme for the Raiders is their run defense they just got ran over during those practices, and then it carried on to the game. I know that the Raiders starting defense sat, but these are still guys that are in the rotation. Thomas Booker, Jonah. So it's not nothing that they just. I mean, it wasn't even close. Like the Texans starting offense just ran these guys over, and that's disheartening to see if you're a Raider fan. Did you kind of feel that being there at the game?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely was honestly surprised to see, how many lanes there were for Woody Marks on that first drive. And he did a good job with his vision and some shiftiness at times as well. Definitely a little bit disappointing for the Raiders, even though, like you said, they're outmatched. Texans are running out their ones. But Marks looked good, I would say.
Yeah, I wasn't a huge Woody Marks fan last year, but seeing him live, he looked pretty big. Like, I don't know if he gained a lot of weight during the off season, but he looks stronger. Like I think he could be a legitimate number 2 back this year. Probably fits that role a little bit better than having to be forced into being a number 1 last year. But I mean, the Raiders couldn't tackle him at practice, and they couldn't tackle him in the game too. The run defense is going to be a major issue, and it's going to affect everything else for the Raiders.
Yeah. I mean, there were definitely some nice flashes. I know Pegues had a nice flash in the run game later, but these are guys that are going to be starting, and right now some of them just look a little bit more like secondary depth pieces, which is unfortunate to see.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about what everybody wants to talk about, and that's Fernando Mendoza, who started the whole first half, and he was getting a lot of pressure. And I thought one of the most positive things from Mendoza was that he didn't get rattled with the pressure. Like, even though guys were getting in free, guys were missing blocks and miscommunications on the offensive line, he was still standing in the pocket strong, still throwing the ball downfield. And that's what you want to see from your young quarterback. What do you think about Mendoza, and how did the ball look coming from his hand live? You saw him at the joint practice and you saw him at the game.
Yeah, I thought Mendoza, what I really like from him is that I feel like he's playing really on time, which I think would be a question for any quarterback transition from college to the pro level, especially with such a drastically different scheme from what he was running at Indiana. I also feel like he does a good job, I think, taking what the defense gives him. I thought in the joint practice he did a good job, combating the instant pressure by finding guys underneath. I thought he had a really nice rip tonight where he got blasted, but he found not Connor Hayward in the flat as well. So I feel like the timing is really good from him, and the arm talent looks fine. Like he's always getting the ball to his receiver really before the defensive back can get there. I think it's all looking really encouraging with him working from the pocket.
Yeah, his one negative play today was that pick six, and I after watching the replay, the pick six, I tweeted that it looked like it was a little bit on Washington because Washington was the check down where he was supposed to curl and just stay in place, but then he started trying to move into the open zone, and Mendoza thought he was going to stay in place and threw the ball. But I still think the ball was a little late. It should have got there a little quicker. But it was a miscommunication. Mendoza talked about it afterwards that it was a miscommunication as well. So I think the one thing that we do want to see from him is him to speed up his process a little bit. And they talked about that last week too. But one of the only ways that you can speed up your process if you get more and more reps. So it'll be interesting to see how much he plays in that last preseason game. And also, one thing that surprises me with Mendoza, or he does surprisingly well, is he layers the ball over defenders pretty well. And that's something he didn't do a ton of in college, right?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of what people loved about him was really his touch on those perimeter throws. Like he threw a beautiful back shoulder ball constantly I'm blanking on his name, Surratt. Yeah. I think that was like exactly what everyone loved to see from him, but now he's doing a great job showing touch over the middle. Really 2 straight weeks where he's had these excellent balls right over the linebacker. I remember the one he had last week off that under center play action look. This time he got it right over Woodaz, and Woodaz got him later, but I thought that was a really nice ball because it required such perfect timing and placement, right inside to Naylor. So it's good to see him hitting those, dig routes that are so consistent in, the Kubiak scheme.
Yeah, I mean, Brock Purdy is really good at doing that, and it's like one of the things he's best at doing it. So if you can do that, it just opens up so much in this scheme as far as just being able to attack those areas of the field that they want to attack in this offense. And one of his best throws of the day was a deep one to Malik Benson. Like on a TV copy, you couldn't really see what was happening. Like, did you see how that route kind of unfolded?
I believe it was kind of like a corner, and then he sort of curled back to the quarterback. I'm not sure what exactly the name for that is, but they call that. It was swirl. Just okay, got you. Yeah, no. So Benson kind of worked back and boxed out the defensive back, and that was nice on time from Mendoza. That was good pass protection as well. He had a lot of time to stand in there and wait for the route to develop.
Yeah, and Malik Benson, is a guy that's been standing out in practice. Like, it seems like every single day, we're getting reports that he made a big play in practice. He's got a strong connection with Mendoza. He's worked a lot with Mendoza outside of practice as well. So it's good to see him have that success. But he also dropped a couple of passes in the joint practice on the play that Kirk Cousins threw that pick six. He actually ran the wrong route. I found that out today, actually, that he ran around the play. Yes. So you're getting these rookie mistakes that are kind of propping up with him. But I think the most encouraging part is he's just creating a lot of separation. And on the broadcast, I think it was Troy Aikman that said that one of the coaches, I believe it was Clint Kubiak, believes that he has the ability to be a number 1 receiver, which is kind of a huge compliment. So we'll see if that's true or not. But what do you think about Malik Benson before the draft? Did you watch a lot of him?
I did not see a lot of him, to be honest. I would agree with you, though, that his separation looked really nice tonight. I mean, there was the drop, but he also ran a really nice whip route on one of those plays, breaking towards the sideline. I mean, both of the drops, it looked like him and Mendoza had some really nice chemistry with their timing. I mean, Mendoza was getting the ball out right as he was, breaking outside. So that's definitely good to see them building that rapport. But obviously, if he's going to get on the field, he's going to have to be more dependable in those spots because some of those really killed the drives.
Yeah, and another guy that really stood out to me was Mike Washington. He had another good game where he's just running over guys. I know he kind of had that mistake with that check down, but as far as just being a pure runner, man, this guy it's hard to bring down. He has kind of upright running style that reminds me of Reminds me of I'm blanking on his name right now, but
Latavius?
Latavius
Was that what
Murray, and there's another. Uh, was it he was a first round pick for the Raiders at running back, but he ran upright too. I can't believe I'm forgetting his name right now, but yeah, he's
McFadden?
McFadden. Yeah, McFadden.
That's right.
Yeah, they're almost the exact same size, and they run upright, but they're able to lower their shoulder at that point where you need to, and just run over guys, and they're explosive as hell too. So what do you think about Mike Washington, and how do he look live?
Yeah, I was a really big fan of Mike Washington in the draft. That was really one of my guys because, like you said, he's really big. He picks up steam fast, and what I really like from him in this preseason is we've seen kind of that vision at the second level, and his ability to kind of adjust to where defenders are coming towards him in real time and navigate through all of that. I mean, he had that really nice run last week against the Cardinals where he perfectly navigated the second level. On the big run today, he kind of ran into his interior lineman at first, but then he cut back right around the entire defense, broke a tackle from Jadeveon Clowney, which I thought was pretty impressive because Clowney was really disrupting just about everyone else on the field. He looked too good to be out there, to be honest. I think he fits right in with the starting Texans defense. But yeah, no, I really, really like what I'm seeing from Washington. His contact balance really seems to be translating. He's getting yards after contact on just about every carry. So it's really nice to see the combination of athleticism and power. He's succeeding on those outside runs and also doing a good job downhill.
Yeah, and at one point during the offseason, Kubiak said he wanted to give Ashton Genty kind of like a CMC type of workload. But I wonder, with Mike Washington emerging the way he is now, like, how's that split going to look?
Yeah, that's another thing I'm wondering too, because I know I saw it in the chat, but what we saw from Clint Kubiak in Seattle is that he doesn't mind sort of preserving his, star running back that everyone might think is the more talented guy of the bunch. But I think they drafted Mike Washington for a reason, and I think we're also seeing that he is a really dynamic back himself, and it's not just that he's coming in and doing the dirty work. And I think that he has a lot of explosive playability himself. So I am really interested to see, Genty's a real bruiser as well. They're not too different of running backs, honestly, even though I think Genty's just better, of course. But I think I could absolutely see, Washington commanding some red zone work because he really has been a dynamic force that's opened up their offense and given them their biggest plays in both the preseason and the joint practice. He had a great run in the joint practice.
Yeah, and it's funny that you said they're kind of similar because I saw Mike Washington just run straight into a guy. And I thought the same thing I thought last year, where I was like, I know that Ashton Genty can run over guys head up, but there are times where you don't need to just run into a guy straight up. Like, try to elude him, try to hit half a shoulder. And Genty even talked about needing to do that last year too. So like, maybe he's just amped up being an NFL, but we don't always have to take a guy head on because
of course
it's a lot. It builds up over a course of a season. But another one of the Raiders' young draft picks, Jermod McCoy, actually got a lot of run today, and I thought he looked pretty good. Like, he was pretty sticky in coverage, but he still gave up a catch at the catch point where he's right now he's just struggling finishing by knocking the ball down. But he's at least right there, and you can see him just be really sticky. And he on the one play, on his biggest play today, where he actually caused an incomplete pass on a third down, he didn't finish it because he, taunted the guy, stood over him, and kind of did the thumbs down thing. So, what do you see from McCoy?
Yeah, I think it's very nice to see that the athleticism is translating. I honestly haven't seen too much of him really being tested downfield, but we absolutely know that he's capable of hanging in those situations. Yeah, I think he was right there on one of those catches. I think it was Lewis Bond maybe over the middle, who's also been shining a lot for the Texans. I may be wrong about that. But yeah, it was a nice performance from McCoy, I thought, especially because, people were harsh on him last week, getting picked on in the red zone. Today, I think he really held his own. Like you said, he's in good position, and we know he has the ball skills from the Tennessee tape. So hopefully that can come around soon.
Yeah, and he got a lot of snaps today. So I'm wondering how his body will react to it afterwards, because that's the question right now, is how is McCoy going to hold up when he's playing extended snaps? He's been kind of on a snap count in practice, and I think they're starting to take that off of him. as he's getting more run. So hopefully, he feels good and we get a healthy McCoy during the season, because I can see the talent. Like, obviously he didn't have the greatest week last week, but when you rewatch the film, you just see how he moves. It's different. So just hopefully we get a healthy McCoy for the rest of the season.
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely been surprised as well to see how much run he's getting, and I think it's an encouraging thing. But like you said, what happens next will tell all.
Yeah. So my last question, and maybe if you want to stick around and answer some of these questions in the chat.
Sure.
But my last question is, after seeing the Raiders in the joint practice and seeing the Raiders in the game, try to ignore the excitement you got from the AOC legacy drive to finish the game. But like, where do you think the Raiders are? I think there's some, every fan knows that we're in a rebuild, but they also have hope that maybe this team could be better than people expect. But after this week, like, where do you think the Raiders are as a team?
I think with the Raiders, obviously they've accumulated so much talent that I've gotten excited about over the years, and it is a little concerning to see how the defense struggled a lot in the joint practices. Especially, I thought the Texans receivers were getting a lot of separation early on in the practice, which is a bit disappointing to me, because I really like a lot of the pieces they have in the secondary. Stooks was one that I thought played really well today. I do want to give him that credit, and I feel like Raiders fans should be very optimistic about him. But I think the Raiders are not the worst team in the league. I don't think that they're going to be in, that Dolphins, Browns, Cardinals territory quite, because I do think that they have plenty of different ways to generate offense. And I think there is a real chance that Mendoza comes in and gives them a spark. I do wish that they had a little bit more at receiver to really open up the offense. It feels like, Mendoza a lot of time has to settle for these underneath throws. And I think that's really what's probably going to be a big goal next offseason is, get that really game-changing receiver. As much as I like guys like Naylor and Besh, and I think Trey Tucker can bring a dynamic element as well. I think the Raiders I think every fan should probably expect them to finish at the bottom of the AFC West, but I would not be surprised if they're able to rattle off some wins late in the year and Mendoza gets in there and they go into next season with a lot of momentum. I could see them being sort of like this year's Saints, where, Mendoza, like Tyler Shuck, comes in and they're able to play some pretty consistent offense. I'm just a little worried about the defense at this point, because they really do have a lot of issues up front outside of Max Crosby. And I'm not sure you can count on the linebacker additions to mask all of that.
Yeah, to me, I mean, I think it this week showed very clearly where the Raiders are, and it's what we expected. Like, we're not exactly sure where the offensive line is yet. We know that Linderbaum is going to improve this offensive line, but there's still questions, and they just did not play very well against an elite defensive line against the Texans. So first, they have to make sure that the offensive line is in a position where they can protect Mendoza when he actually comes in, because you don't want to put him in a position where he's running for his life all day and creating bad habits. And I think he has the wherewithal to be able to survive that, but it's just not an ideal situation for your young quarterback. So you want to see them perform a little bit better, and maybe they can have some strong performances against teams that aren't the Texans. I also think that Mendoza is just getting really good really quickly. Like, maybe his progress is coming along much faster than they expected. I think, every week the game starting count for Kirk Cousins goes down for me. So at first, before the season, I thought after week 13, and then after week one of the preseason, I thought, or maybe week 8, and then now I'm thinking this could be a very short leash for Kirk Cousins. Like, he didn't look good against the Texans when he was getting a lot of pressure, but we'll see.
Yeah, and I think it really was encouraging to see Mendoza in the joint practice against the Texans defense. I thought he did a good job getting the ball out and sort of, overcoming a lot of the pressure he had to deal with. Of course, you don't want to put your quarterback in that situation too often, or else the wheels might fall off. I mean, Petrie jumped one of those underneath throws in the flat eventually. But yeah, I really do like how Mendoza was coming along. And just like you, I didn't expect him to get this comfortable in the pro style system this quickly. I just think it's going to be hard for Kubiak to justify keeping Kirk in for too long. If Kirk is struggling under pressure and he's struggling to move on some of those boots that Kubiak loves to call in his offense, I know that's something that's been discussed a little bit. Yeah, I don't have, crazy expectations for the Raiders by any means, but I definitely think there's a scenario where Mendoza comes in and makes the offense better, and they can go into next season with momentum and confidence in him as the franchise guy. I absolutely see that as a major possibility.
Yeah, and the defense might just be really bad. Like I think there's some young talent in the secondary that's going to be worth watching and worth developing. But if the run defense doesn't get better, then you're not going to get into those third and long situations. You're not going to get into passing situations, and your offense is going to be asked to score a lot of points to try to keep you in it. So to me, the run defense might be the thing that really sinks this team and causes them to be be looking at a top pick getting towards the end of the season.
Yeah, and I think especially for this Kubiak offense, we know that he wants to run the ball a lot and he wants to be very, very methodical. You don't want the defense to put, Mendoza or Kirk in a position where they have to force the issue. And like I said, I don't think they quite have the dynamic receivers to really create a bunch of explosive plays and get into games quite that way. I think they need the defense to contribute, and they need to stay in manageable situations with the scoreboard. So that's definitely the big concern.
Yeah. All right, so let's get into some questions. Ryu Ken says, after today, Ted, I love you, man, but Mendoza looked booty. I really didn't think he looked that bad. At all, honestly. I mean, I know the results weren't exactly what you wanted, but he flashed the ability to make some big throws downfield, and he was getting pressured all day, and he still stood in the pocket and kept his eyes downfield. And he had a couple of huge drops from Benson. I thought one of the drops might have ended up being a touchdown pass if he caught that and ran down the sideline.
Yeah, I think that there were some opportunities that were also missed for him to stay on the field a little bit longer and be able to show more. I thought that he really did settle in after the pick six, and the pick six is rationalized in itself. I mean, of course, people don't like to see that Mendoza has thrown a pick six in the joint practice and the game, but overall, I think it's pretty explanatory why it happened. And I think overall you like how he's processing the field. And I don't think really the decision-making has been a big problem for him. In fact, I think it's been one of the most encouraging things about him so far.
Yep, I agree. All right, next question from Vegas Life 90. What do you guys think of Stooks today? Thought he looked fast and tackled well. I agree. You talked about Stooks a little bit. I saw even in that first preseason game, he was reading things quickly. He was going downhill, but he wasn't tackling very well in that first game. I thought he was just tackling way too high, and that just might be a first game thing where he needed to just get into the action. So I thought the same thing today. He's making reads. He's going downhill. He started at free safety, and then later in the game he started playing nickel, which is pretty much the role that we envisioned for him when he was coming in as a draft prospect.
Yeah, I really thought he made a statement right away with Texans put CJ under center, and they put that roll out, and he found Hutchinson in the flat. And usually that's a way to generate easy yardage, but Stooks was right on it. And I believe he tackled for him for a loss. And I thought his tackling was really consistent throughout, and his processing downhill was good. I honestly thought Stooks was the most impressive player on the entire defense tonight.
Yeah, I agree with that. All right, next question from McSmugger. If the staff feels like the wide receiver room isn't up to snuff in coming weeks, are there any free agents or trade targets that you feel would fit the scheme? All right, why don't you take that one first?
I don't know. I mean, everyone around the league is talking about Kayshon Boutte, and that's been a big conversation with the Texans ever since Jaden Higgins went out for the year. I don't know how realistic it is that the Patriots would want to send him to Houston. Honestly, if I think if Boutte got dealt, it might be to, a team that's less threatening to them in the AFC, like the Raiders. I don't know if they're going to get desperate and, send draft capital for a guy like that. I think that they kind of know where the receiver room is, and I don't think Boutte is dramatically changing the outlook of the offense in any way. I mean, the free agent receivers are also looking quite grim, unless you really want to give a guy like Tyreek Hill a shot. as a scheme fit. I mean, that's the only thing that comes to mind, but I don't know how realistic that is at all.
Yeah, I mean, from a Raiders perspective, I think Booty would make some sense, but I also don't think he has a high enough ceiling to where I want to trade away a draft pick and add him
Exactly.
to
Yeah.
the receiver room. And I think the fact that you have Malik Benson, who is flashing, also, I think it's worth trying to develop him and get him snaps. Like if you bring a guy in like Booty, he's going to be on the field and he's going to take away snaps from a guy like Benson. I think you should be realistic about where this team is and just try to develop some of those young guys, see what Naylor could do in a bigger role than he had in Minnesota.
Yeah, I just don't see them getting too desperate, and I think especially with how much they want to use their tight ends in the passing game as well. We haven't seen as much of Bowers on the field with Mendoza and everything, so I think that's also a big test for them once the regular season starts in terms of evaluation and what they need.
Yeah, I mean they're going to be in 12 personnel so much. It's like that third receiver is going to barely get on the field because with Bowers, technically you are in 11 personnel because he can be your slot.
Exactly.
He is your slot, and he could play outside when you need him to as well. Also, I think I'm going to go Bowers second round for all my fantasy drafts. We'll see what happens. I'll die. I might die, or it might be explosive strategy for me. We'll see what happens, but I think I'm going to do it. All right, next question.
Yeah,
go ahead. You haven't drafted yet?
I was going to say, I've wanted to take Bowers in the second round, but I keep getting the late first round picks, and he's the guy that people want to get at the end of the second round. I think he's a good target, but that's besides the point.
No, I one of my biggest drafts, I have the last pick of the draft, so I'm going to get that 1-2 round. And that's the one
that's
draft.
That's Genty territory,
like, yeah. That's the one draft where I'm like, maybe I won't get Bowers in the second round, or maybe I'll just go ahead and just pull the trigger anyways. All right, next question from PRST4190. How about Rodgers and Zune instead of JPJ and Glaze? So Trey Zune is a guy that is getting a lot of right tackle snaps right now. He's getting some center snaps as well. I think he's getting some guard snaps, but not as many as at right tackle and at center. So I like Roger. Oh, I think he's saying Rodgers and Zune on the right side instead of JPJ and Glaze on the right side. Zune, I think he has some promise, and I have to go back in the film and watch how he performed against Clowney. I know he gave up one pressure when Clowney had an inside move on him, but I got to go back on the film and see how he performed. But I think Glaze had a pretty good first week of preseason. But I think if he doesn't perform early in the season, I wouldn't be surprised if Zune did overtake him at the right side.
Yeah, I haven't seen too much about all of the offensive linemen, but what I will say is, I believe the interior offensive line struggled a lot. JPJ was out during the joint practice on Tuesday, if I'm correct. Yeah, and I think they struggled a lot without him. So I would expect to see him out there. And I think Zune has looked quite good in the preseason for the most part, but not a guy who's like absolutely clearly your best option at right tackle. So I could see it, but not certain.
Yeah. I mean, it's just a positive sign that he can emerge as an option if Glaze does struggle. All right. Next question from Jorge Meza Guzman. How do you feel about our defensive front facing top 10 offensive lines this season? Not good. Not good. I think this is going to be a bottom tier run defense.
Yeah, I would unfortunately have to agree. And looking at their schedule, I mean, they're going to run into Buffalo. They're going to run into Kansas City. They're going to run into, Denver a couple times. So Rams as well. They're definitely going to be some weeks where the offense might not be able to get on the field very often because the other team can just run the ball and call it a day.
Yeah, and one interesting stat I found was the Raiders were a mid-tier run defense last season, but they also were a top 3 team as far as keeping an extra safety in the box because they wanted to run that Pete Carroll cover 3 type of system. But keeping that extra safety in the box give a lot of explosive passes as well. And this year, they're not going to be running that cover 3 system. They're going to be playing a lot of too high. And they were actually one of the worst teams at run defense when they didn't have that safety in the box. So, there were signs that things were going to be bad this season, and they didn't make any upgrades in the defensive front.
Yeah, I think when you play too high, you've got to have some really stout, run stuffing defensive tackles. And unfortunately, like we said, I feel like those guys are the ones that have been especially picked on against Houston this week in the joint practice and the game. So that's of course a big concern when you're trying to live that way defensively.
Yeah, I mean, they improved that linebacker, but like if your defensive tackles are getting pushed 3 yards into the backfield, it just makes their job so much harder.
Exactly. Yep.
All right. Paper Chase asked, does this game help AOC stock? And do you think somebody looks at this game and offers a pick for him? I think so. I think I'm sure there's going to be a team that would offer a late pick for Aiden O'Connell. I think he's actually played better than in the preseason people expect. He just does not have any receivers. I mean, the Raiders barely have first string receivers. So the third, fourth string receivers are going to struggle.
Yeah, I didn't see much separation, and I thought that he just made some really tight throws on that final drive. And I never really thought AOC played horrible football when he got opportunities in the regular season in the McDaniels era. So I think he's absolutely a realistic option for some team if they get a little more thin at the quarterback position. I mean, we saw the Raiders make a move for Kenny Pickett, and I don't think it's crazy to say that AOC is of that caliber for another team in their eyes.
Yeah, I agree. All right. Raider Nell asks, I understand this is preseason and the scheme is vanilla, but we had concerns with the defensive line going into the season, and they're looking valid now. Can scheme mask and fix any of it? It can. I mean, I've talked to a lot of defensive coaches in this offseason about run defense, about light boxes, and there are things schematically that you can do. You can shift the front right before the snap to confuse the blocking scheme. And the Raiders actually are doing a lot of that in training camp, and they did some of that against the Texans in joint practices, but didn't help. But there's run blitzes you can do. And when you get into the season and you start seeing tendencies and you start understanding the opposite teams, what they want to do in certain formations, you could kind of game plan for that. So that's the hope you have for the run defense, is that you can just try to create a negative here and there to where you get a team into a second and long, a third and long situation. But it's really scary to have to live that way.
Yeah, and I guess the one encouraging thing for the Raiders is that they have some really good athletes at the cornerback position who you might trust a little bit more than others to hang on an island in one-on-one coverage if you want to try overloading the box. I mean, I know I saw Leonard ran a sim pressure against Stroud on the opening drive, and I think more of that, getting more guys at the line of scrimmage, could be a big help to the defense. And also in the pass rush, just creating disruption by making the quarterback, take a little bit longer to process the defense, when they're dropping back. I think that it's going to take some creativity and I think some aggression in spots. And it's a little easier to live that way when you have guys like Porter and maybe even McCoy gets in on the outside at some point. We'll see.
Yeah. Rob Leonard actually sent the house a lot today.
Yeah.
I think that kind of shows that if things are not going well defensively, he's willing to bring the heat. And like you said, you're going to have to trust your young corners when you do that. So, if you hit on some of these picks, if some of these young guys end up playing well, like Porter, Stukes, then maybe blitzing is the right strategy if your defensive line can't create pressure or can't stop the run with just the front four.
Yeah.
All right. A couple questions left from Eddie. Does Washington Jr. split carries with Genty? He's looked great in preseason. We talked about this, and I think he's looking good enough to where Kubiak might back down from his original statement that he made during the offseason that he wants to give Ashton Genty a CMC type of workload. Because in the past, Kubiak has had a multiple backfield before. So I think just with how good he's looked, I think you have to consider giving Genty a spell once in a while.
Yeah, I think what we see from Washington is that he is not your ordinary number 2 running back by any means, and I think that he brings a level of intimidation with his physicality and ability to create explosive plays. I think he's absolutely showing enough to justify, taking some touches away from Genty, and of course you'd love to make it out of the season with both of them healthy, and I think it's plausible to have a serviceable run game by doing that.
Yeah, and he just looks so natural on those outside plays because he has the speed to threaten the edge so quickly, and he might even be a little bit more explosive to the edge than Genty is. Not saying that he's close to the same player, but he
Of
might be
course.
faster to the edge.
Yeah.
All right, last question from COHSX. Any thoughts on why they play Naylor and rested Trey? Has Naylor been underwhelming in camp as well? Yeah, that was kind of a curious decision to play Jalen Naylor and rest Trey Tucker. But I think they just wanted Mendoza to have at least one starting weapon. Like, the Raiders we mentioned they don't have a lot of receiving depth. So when you get into that third, fourth receiver territory, those guys aren't separating that well. And I think they just wanted to give Mendoza at least one guy that could separate a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak too much to the entirety of camp, but I will say, what I saw on Tuesday in the joint practice is that Mendoza's receivers really were often struggling to get separation. And Naylor, I think they brought in because of his ability to beat man coverage with JJ McCarthy last year in Minnesota. So that may explain it, but I also do think that Kubiak in the first game showed that he really likes Trey Tucker. I mean, he was moving him around. He was trying to create mismatches and leverage his explosiveness to create easy throws, and he succeeded that way. So I am interested to see Trey Tucker as not just a deep threat, but more of an underneath weapon that can get that quick separation and, can run away from guys and make plays after the catch. I wouldn't be surprised if Tucker, overtakes Naylor in the room.
Yeah, he actually last week in the first drive for the Raiders, they motioned him and they put him on a little choice route. He read the route, read the leverage correctly, broke outside, and had a nice run after the catch. So I don't think you would want to draft any of these Raiders receivers on your fantasy team, but you just hope they're at least useful and you have a couple guys that could break 700 yards.
Yeah, I'm hopeful for Besh as well in some spots. I think he's showing some third down potential as that gutsy, physical, tight catch guy as well. So I like guys in their roles, but they're all clearly, I think, role players. Maybe Tucker has the most upside of them all, though. That's kind of how I'm feeling right now.
Got it. All right, Nico, thank you so much for joining us, especially after the game, rushing home and getting on this live pod with me. It was great finally talking to you. I wish I actually talked to you at the joint practice, man, but can you tell people? Yeah, I didn't even know you were there until I started checking your tweets. I was like, oh, Nico's here.
Yeah, no, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh no, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say I saw some of your tweets like really late in practice, and in that point I didn't really think that it was any interaction would happen between us, but I'm glad we were able to do it now. I mean, this was a really fun time, and I really love how you see the game. So
yeah, appreciate it, and man, you're killing it on TikTok or wherever you are. So congrats on the success. Can you tell a little bit tell people where to find you?
Yeah, you can find me on TikTok at Elite Takes, and then also on YouTube and Instagram and Twitter, Elite Takes _. So yeah, no, I'm trying to do more long form content, but pretty much my main thing is, daily TikToks and a lot of live tweeting as well. I mean, it's a lot of fun.
All right, guys, thank you so much for joining us, and we will talk to you guys soon.